Oh my goodness. I hope that I wasn't just talking for 20 minutes on that first attempt with no sound, because when I got everything plugged in, looked at my computer settings, I noticed that my speaker had a big red X. So that first take, I might have just been chattering with no sound. And if that is the case, I humbly apologize. This has been a crazy day already, but we are back live. It's So a Jelly Roll Day, and I am making the jelly chain. You can find the jelly chain block pattern free download today and sew along with me. I cut all of my units from a jelly roll package, and I cut my units into 3 sizes. I have 2.5-inch squares, I have 4.5-inch rectangles, and I have 6.5-inch rectangles. So you can see my three sizes there, and I put a demo video on my channel about the cutting. So welcome everyone. Happy Jelly Roll Day. Thanks for spending part of your day with me. I'd love to know where you are and what color jelly roll strips you are sewing with today. I have my warm and my cool, my red and my blue strips here. You also need an accent color, and I am using white. So I've cut a bunch of 2.5-inch squares from my yardage of white and paired that with the pack of jelly roll strips. And our first step is to make the 4-patch, which you can see there. And then we're going to build like a log cabin on both sides. Hello, Donna. Thank you for contributing to the Quilts of Valor project. And I hope you enjoy the jelly chain that we are making today. Do you have jelly roll strips handy? I hope, probably patriotic if you just finished a Quilt of Valor. This block was originally done in greens for my monochromatic series. So I used a dark green and a light green. Wonderful scrappy project. So we'll see what it looks like today in a more of a 2-color version. Yeah, thanks. Catch up, dive in anytime. So it's a really easy block to put together with some simple cuts. I'm starting my 4 patches. So I've sewn my 2 units together, the 2.5-inch squares, and then you just pair them up to make a simple 4-patch. And I do use a pin for that. I nest my seams, so my seams are pressed towards the darker fabric. And then we can just start I've got my little pile of 4 patches. The pattern download for the jelly chain block is at truebluequilts.com. There is a link in the video description, so please hop over and download your block instructions. And of course, if you want to pick up a copy of the monochromatic book, I would be happy to send you a signed copy of that as well. That's available in the shop. Okay, so I've done my chain piecing for the 4 patches. And here you can see the finished block. Now, one tip that I have for you is to always keep your 4 patch in the same orientation. So when I work with this, I want my white square at the bottom left so that it makes an uphill chain. That way all of my blocks have the same orientation. And since we only build on 2 sides of this block, it is not completely symmetrical. So that's why we have to pay attention to the layout of that 4 patch when we get started. Okay, so I've got several more to work with. So I will just keep talking through the steps and you can let me know if you have questions along the way, what you're working on. Here is a interesting, well, flipping or spinning my seams. I look at the back and this one is going counterclockwise, so I'm just going to alternate those two. Makes a cute little 4 patch in the center of that block, and then I can finger press those 2 sides of that 4 patch so that it's ready to go. A nice little trick there to get all your seams laying as flat as possible. So if you have never done that, spinning your seams, you may need someone to demo that in real life. And I'm going to lay my 4 patches down with the chain going uphill, bottom left to top right, so that I get my blocks going the right way. Or so that all my blocks are consistent. It would kind of be a waste to demo what happens if you don't put them in the right orientation. But it's kind of like when you make a log cabin block and somehow you get off and you add a strip to a side that's already been there. It just looks a little off kilter. And so if I had rotated that block and started adding fabric on the wrong side, then obviously I would be off track with the rest of my piecing, and things wouldn't be able to lay out nicely when we get done. So I have my 4 patch and I'm ready to add my warm colors. So the warm colors, you just pick up the rectangle and add it. For the cool colors on the blue side, I need to add my white square to those units as I get going. So let me get a few of those units prepped so that we can just keep chain piecing. And I like to work with really scrappy layouts. So cutting everything from one jelly roll package feels limiting, to be honest. But in the spirit of Sew a Jelly Roll Day, I have set aside a little bit of my scrappy tendencies. Because if you look through the quilts in my monochromatic book, it's one color family, but tons and tons. Every quilt in there is a scrappy quilt. Hi, Robin. Welcome from Maryland. And ooh, black and white with a bit of red, just like the newspaper. Black and white and red all over. I love it. I bet that would be very, very dramatic. And a friend asked me about just using a whole rainbow. And I bet, like, I'm grouping my colors. I'm grouping all the red, yellow, orange on the warm side, and then the teals, blues on the other side for the cool side. But I bet if you had the full rainbow of colors in your strips, these blocks would just be really, really fun. And then just pick a single accent color like I've done with the white in the chain. So, all the colors are really pretty. You can't, it's why I think it's kind of a funny question to ask, what's your favorite color? Because I honestly, I use all the colors in my quilts. Even though as true blue quilts, I do have a little bit of a preference, but I do, you wouldn't know from looking at a lot of my recent quilts that I'm such a diehard blue person because I bring all the colors in. Of course, in my clothing choices, on the other hand, I let that blue stand out. Okay, I think I have enough of the white squares and units attached. So when I add my red strips, which in this case happen to be this multicolor yellow, I don't need to pin because that fits right in place. And we'll just keep adding those. I try not to have the same combination of colors. Since I just used this multicolor yellow, I picked up a different shade from my pile. And you are in charge of what your quilt looks like, so just go for it. So I'm adding my warm strip to the warm side of my 4-patch. I always think it would be fun to set up a sewing machine or table in public somewhere, because the general public doesn't know a lot about quilting, and so it would just be fun, like they have pianos at the mall. I think it would be so fun to have a little sewing stand one day and just be working on, kind of how people will paint or do some kind of art in public, and people can come in and ask them questions. And you know, you start talking to people and everybody knows a quilter. But they may not know how it all comes together. Okay, so I've got this lovely bit of chained piecing done. Get all these separated and start the next step. Some people just add units to their chain without cutting, and I can't do that. Got some of my longer units ready when that step gets here. My medium units. And I've got one more 4-patch as kind of my leader ender project. So finger press as I go. And now I'm adding the cool strip to the block. My 4.5-inch strip with the white chain unit on the end for the second round. Now, the fun part about these jelly chain blocks is that once we have several of them, they go together like half square triangles. So any pattern that has that diagonal line in it, we could build chevrons, we can do the kind of concentric circles, you know, the way things ripple out from the center from that sample quilt. I put it off center, obviously. You could do more of a trip around the world where you just have that one unit in the center and then it grows. You could just do diagonal rows. So any of those classic shapes you could put together with this. Here's my next one, and I want to make this into a design wall now. There's a company that sells felt boards that I think is what I want to put up. I have a piece of batting on the far wall across the room that I use as my design wall currently, but it's this little setup with my sewing machine would be a much better place to have the design wall handy. When I'm not on camera, it's much easier to get up and go across the room to the design wall. There's a lot of space, and they do make portable design walls, which is convenient also. But the one I have it's just a tiny, like 11 by 17. And when you have a whole quilt ready or several 12-inch blocks ready to show, that small portable design wall does not help. If I'm just showing the layout of one block, it's perfect, but hard to fill every need. Okay, where are we? I'm spinning my seams on these 4 patches. So I just make those. I love that cute little 4 patch that appears when you get your seams spun. Mine are kind of going counterclockwise there on the back of my block. There is our second round. We're ready for our third round of units. And this is another check on your 1/4 inch seam, because if the part of the block with the seam perfectly matches your pre-cut unit, then you know you are doing pretty well with your cutting and sewing. That doesn't always happen for me. I tolerate a lot of imperfection in my life, so. I'm always tempted to do the paper sack method of scrappy quilting. Just cut all your fabrics and put them in a paper sack and then use whichever one you pull out next. But I tend to dig through my piles and choose a fabric that I haven't used yet in that block. So like the next 2 fabrics were that orange and the red, and I already have the orange in my block. So that makes it pretty easy to choose that red. So once you have done the pre-cutting for our 3 different size pieces that go in this block, 2.5, 4.5, 6.5, they really come together quickly. Oh, and there I ran out of bobbin. So luckily I just did 1. Nope, I did a bunch. I did 3 whole blocks with no bobbin thread. Isn't that irritating? And again, this is just my life my life recently. I'm scrambling to get from one place to another, and I'm looking for my neutral thread. I thought I had another spool of course, the thread I have closest to me right now is dark, and I don't really want to use that for piecing. Let's see how much, if I can get a bobbin's worth off of that spool. Things you should check before you go live on video to sew. Do you have a spare bobbin ready? Not maybe half a bobbin. We'll see. And there, we're empty. Empty spool. I like using up the very last bit of thread on my spools. And I've got a very small amount on that bobbin. We'll see. I'm probably due to open up my machine and clean out all the dust bunnies as well. So I will have to do that when I get off my live stream. It will be time for some machine maintenance TLC. Okay, so there we have a fresh bobbin. And yep, all of those blocks were sewn without bobbin thread. How lovely. But it doesn't take us too long to get sewing again, but this spool is low, so it's not. I am going to increase my stitch length. Okay, this one needs just a little bit more. Ran out in the middle on that one. Okay. Okay, after my little bobbin break, we are back to our jelly chain block. So if you are just joining us, welcome. I am putting together the jelly chain. Has a chain of an accent color, and all of my units started from a 2.5-inch strip. You can download the full pattern instructions from truebluequilts.com. The pattern is free today for Sew a Jelly Roll Day. Okay, so here's a good example of why you need to keep your fabric in the right orientation when you add the next strip. We have two choices. I need to add this unit. I could add, well, yeah, I could do this a lot of ways. I could put my blue up here, but then the blue is not touching the blue. So that's your first clue, is you want to keep your colors organized. The other clue is that the white square is not making a chain. So I have to flip this around and put the blue next to the blue and keep the chain going across the middle. So look for those patterns when you are putting your block together, and hopefully that will save you some time with your seam ripper. I mean, we all like a date with Jack, but perhaps not Jack the Ripper. Okay, let's see, now that I got my bobbin issue straightened out. Clean those up. Okay. And now we are ready to finish this. I always press towards the color I just added. And now I can add my longest blue strip with the white chain. Again, I'm keeping that chain going, adding blue to blue, and we will have our block ready to go. After I get this batch, I will try to show you some of the layouts, but that may have to wait for a different video. I'm curious if you follow any quilters who have a Patreon channel, if you are using that platform, or if channel membership is an attractive option. I was just trying to think of a way to, when I share these block layouts, what would be the obviously I'll make a YouTube video and share out that way. But before I do that, if you were on my newsletter list, you would get the information a little bit faster than the general public does on YouTube. Okay, reached the end with 1, 2, 3, and one under the needle is 4 blocks are finished. So yes, that will be plenty to show you some layout options. Jelly chain block. Similar to a log cabin, but we're only building up 2 sides. Nice bright colors from this jelly roll from Island Batik. The white fabric was just some regular quilting cotton that I had in my stash. And there is another one. Okay, so as I said, you can put all of the, you can put the similar colors together, and that's going to start to make kind of a, you know, a square in the center. You could, you know, and then whichever you want to, you could, if you arrange them this way, you, with the chains parallel, you've got those diagonal lines going across your quilt. So lots of options when you put these blocks together. But like, I like to work in sets, so I need to get some more four patches done. So I'm going back to my 2.5-inch squares for the beginning of my block. I have to remember to get an equal number of red squares and blue squares so that I can actually make a block. I did not count out exactly, you know, how many of each size and color I had. I figure I can cut more once I figure out how many blocks I want for the size quilt. And with these bright colorful strips, I think this will be a fun charity donation to like Project Linus or one of the charities like that that takes kids' quilts. Okay, so I've got my you have 1 or 2 blocks that are on a different step that gives you kind of a built-in leader ender for your project. I'm looking right next to me, my favorite little cutting tool, my chain piecing blade saver. So I can just quickly cut those units that were chain pieced together. And here is another completed block from my previous set of chain piecing. So now I can take all of these 2 patches and turn them into 4 patches after I press to the dark. And does anybody have, watching college football? We let our cable subscription go years ago, and so we don't get some of those sports channels unless they're on the major networks. I did count that right. Okay. I probably don't absolutely need to pin my 4 patches with those seams that nest. You can probably get it to line up pretty well. Without a pin, but it just gives me that sense of security that those fabrics will stay in place. Okay, so that was 3 4 patches. So now I need to come back and make my other units with the white squares on my 4.5-inch strip and on my 6.5-inch strip. Remember, you only add the white square to one of your colors. So pick which half of the block you are going to add the white squares to. Either the, I'm using reds and blues. So my red rectangles, I just add plain. My blue rectangles get the white square on the end. And that helps me keep track and get things in the right place as I am piecing these blocks together. Okay, we should be ready to get a few more blocks done. Oh, I didn't. I've got those 2 that I did not put pieces together for. So let me do 2 more units, and then our supplies are getting low. I've gone through about half a jelly roll when I was cutting in preparation for this. And of all the white squares, that's all I have left. When I was looking at the pattern, the green quilt that I'm basing this off of in my monochromatic book, this quilt is a twin. It's 64 by 80 and it uses 63 blocks. So you do need quite a few to make a bigger quilt. Again, they finish at 8 inches. So if you got some longer strips, then you would obviously have fewer blocks if you made the overall size bigger. Okay. Keeping my chain going there. And blue touches blue. All these little tricks to make sure you get things in the right place in these blocks. I talk to myself a lot when I am quilting, just reminding myself of the next step and what I should be looking for. Okay, back to my little 4 patches. I'm finger pressing, so I'm going to spin those seams first. Always a fun step to just pop those couple stitches at the very center of your block and make sure it is pressed and ready to lay flat. Else do I have those wrong way? My additional units. Long, short, short. Okay. Okay, finish this block out with, you see, we just have 3 steps there for our 2, 4, and 6 inch rectangles. Obviously, they're cut 2.5, 4.5, 6.5. Excuse me for enjoying my smoothie on air. Racing from one thing to another this morning. I had an appointment and then knew I would need a little something. So let's do some mental math and figure out how many blocks to make. I said this would be a fun donation to a children's charity. So maybe a lap size 48 by 60. That would mean 6. So let's go a little longer. 48 by 64, or we could do 56 by 64, a little more squarish. What do you think? A skinny rectangle or a fatter rectangle? So the 48 by 64 would be 6 by 8 layout, which is 48 blocks, or the 56 by 64 would be 7 by 8, which would be 56 blocks. So we'll see how far we get. I've got about 10 so far. So we are a long way from our layout decisions there. Thinking about layouts, I just did a large cornerstone in this layout, but it would be fun to make I'm trying to get my finger in the right place, to make a 4-patch in the corner and just continue that chain out into the borders. You can do a lot of fun things. That one's done. So let's see here. I have 2, 4, 7, 1, 2, just 6, and then the one on the wall makes 7. So yeah, I'm a long way from any type of layout, but I will keep using up all the strips in my jelly roll. The problem I did, let me grab. And with just 7 blocks made so far, it's not that big a deal. Here is the other half of the jelly roll. You can see, let's pull it apart here carefully. I used which side has the fold? This side has the fold. So yes, I used these reds, orange, yellow. I left this solid yellow out so I can go back and add those shades in. This is like a teal and a red. I left out these shades because that kind of put there were more of these blues than the reds. So I suppose I could use those on both sides. That might be interesting. I may have to play around in EQ8 and see what that would look like to have this on both sides. It might distract. So that takes out like six strips out of the jelly roll set. And I don't know how many blocks I'm going to get only using the colors. Obviously, I've mentioned several times that I used yardage for the white squares, but to see if you can make an entire quilt with just one jelly roll plus that accent chain. But that's a fun rainbow print there with the blue on top. So I've got lots more fabric to cut, even though I'm getting kind of skimpy on the units that I cut ahead of time. And the thing is, you can always buy more fabric, or add from your stash, as the case may be for some of us well-endowed quilters. so I'm ready for my blue pieces on this next bit. Okay, and then this one is ready for a long. Okay, and then I'm digging in my pile of my 6.5-inch units to add. These balloons are so cheery, bright and cheerful. blocks in all different stages here coming together. This one's finished. Always like to show off the finished block. 8-inch finished. 2, 4, 6, 8. And yeah, I just used these batiks are all part of one jelly roll, and I added the yardage white strips from my stash. I had about a half a yard available of that. Hasn't all been cut up yet, but we are going to have some fun. So as soon as I get a decent amount of blocks made, maybe, 20-ish, then I will play with some layouts on my design wall, and I will share those in a future video. So make sure you are subscribed to this channel, and you will be able to see those coming up very soon. And now I'm in trouble because I don't like to repeat the same fabric, and the only blue that I had ready was the little confetti one right there. So already used that one. Sorry, Charlie, we have to choose something else. Same thing for this one. We need a, I'll go with this one. Another finished block. And depending on, depending on your layout, if you turn these blocks, you don't have seams to match up except down here at the white square. So that can be a bonus to putting things together. Nope. Oh, it was. I did not plan out exactly how many white squares I would need for the numbers of colored pieces that I cut. So I just did what looked like a decent size stack, and so there's one. And so I have 3 squares and each block takes 4. So I can make one more block this afternoon, and then I have to stop and cut some more fabric. So I'll get that. I think if these are 2 complete blocks. Yep, that one's done. And that one's done. So I did the and since my white fabric is tone on tone, I just drop it down into my lap where there's a shadow, and then I can tell the dull side, which is the wrong side, versus the bright side where the design pops up, and I can tell which is the right side of my fabric for that tone on tone white. So I check that before I go. Okay, we are good there. I do need some of my what am I going to use as my leader enders? I've got a bunch of triangles over here, but they are all dark. I like to do these little hourglass units with my leftover triangles, but obviously they look the best if you have a dark and a light, and I just have a bunch of dark fabric triangles, so I'm gonna just use one as a little snip of thread catcher, and then I can get this last block put together for our jelly roll celebration. I have seen lots of pictures online for quilt shows this fall. That is wonderful. So many beautiful projects. Finger pressing my blocks. Of course, I will take these all to the iron when I am done and press them before they're sewn together, or if they're laying flat enough, and you just sew your rows together and then press the whole top before I start quilting. Another stage of the process. See, I could have had so many more blocks done if I just had a secondary project to work on. Kind of difficult to come up with something on the spur of the moment. With some of these, you need to pre-plan. So I've got, as I said, I make a bunch of hourglass units as my leader enders. Hi, Nina. Nina is asking how many pieces to cut from a strip. I did 3 of each size. So from one strip, I cut 3 6.5-inch pieces, 3 4.5-inch pieces, and 3 2.5-inch pieces. And then I went to a different strip of white to get my accent white squares that are all 2.5. So from my colored jelly rolls, I did the 2, 4, 6 and got 3 of each size. So our block comes together with a 4 patch to begin with. Then you add your 4.5-inch pieces and then finish up with our 6.5-inch pieces. And all of this is detailed on the pattern download from the website truebluequilts.com. You can find a link in the video description. And so what I was saying about my leader enders, I've got a whole basket of these hourglass units, and now I need to go cut some accent strips so that I can put these all together in blocks. But right now I've just got a random collection of hourglass units. So I feel, using a little scrap of fabric as a thread catcher doesn't feel very productive, but when I've got a whole basket of things that I can't do anything with, that's not really useful either. So, these first world problems of a modern quilter. Okay. And there is our block. Like I said, I didn't evenly cut my white squares to go with my colored squares. So I definitely have plenty of fabric to continue making blocks. And this is most of half of a jelly roll. So I have the one block up there. Then we have 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So you probably, let's see, 12, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 blocks. So 36 blocks at least from a whole jelly roll. That wouldn't be too bad to make a 6x6, so a 48-inch square quilt top. You could add some borders to that to make it a little bit larger. And that's a decent kid or lap quilt. So there you go. If you like the jelly chain and the design opportunities that it presents, you can find that pattern at truebluequilts.com. And I am going to sign off for now. And thank you for sewing along with me. Enjoy your jelly roll day, and we'll be back with some layout options real soon. Have a great day.